The three diets in terms of health that have worked the best for me, that have gotten me into remission and have given me absolutely zero symptoms, have been the Paleo diet, the keto diet, and the carnivore diet. So those are the three that work for me. However, everyone's going to be a little bit different. Experiment with different diets, see what works for you, and whichever one works for you, stick with it. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Welcome back to another Sunday Q&A. Today's question is with regard to my experience with ulcerative colitis and how the carnivore diet has personally affected me. Has it helped with my ulcerative colitis? Has it not? So those are going to be the questions I will be answering in today's video. I'm going to start with my initial symptoms when I first started experiencing back in 2009, and I will go all the way to my current health status and how I feel right now. Now, I had already mentioned in earlier videos how I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis back in 2010. However, my experience with ulcerative colitis and my symptoms began a year prior in 2009. In late 2009, around October, November, I started experiencing some minor symptoms, and it was mostly a little bit of blood in the stool, nothing major. My stools were pretty much normal. There was just a little bit of blood at the time. And then in early 2010, around March, that's when symptoms started getting really bad. In March of 2010, I had just started a new job at this big chain gym near where I live. And I was working crazy hours. I was working between 12 to 16 hours a day. So the stress of working that many hours every single day, coupled with the symptoms that I already was experiencing, had exacerbated the symptoms even more. And what happened was, I remember there was one day, I remember this very vividly. I was getting ready to go to work. I was in the shower getting ready. And then right away, I started noticing really bad stomach pain. So I had to jump out of the shower to go to the washroom. And as soon as I finished going, I looked and it looked like somebody had gotten murdered in the toilet. It didn't even look like somebody went to the washroom. It was just bright red and the entire toilet was just completely covered with blood. I ended up getting back in the shower. And while I went back in the shower, my mother had went into the washroom and she saw all the blood in the toilet. And I have a sister who's 10 years younger than me. When I got out of the shower, she asked me if my sister had been in there because she thought that my sister had her period and that she ended up, that's what that blood was in the toilet. And I told her, no, that was me. So we ended up scheduling an appointment to see a gastroenterologist. And it got to the point where in March, just before my appointment to see the gastroenterologist, I had gotten so bad that I had to leave work early. I remember I would eat something and then within 30 seconds I had to run to the washroom, and a lot of times I would have a salad, go to the washroom, and I would see salad in the toilet. It would just go right through me. And there was one day where it got really bad to the point where I was feeling very nauseous, and I decided to leave a little bit early. On my way home, I had to pull off to the side of the road and I ended up throwing up everything that I had eaten a couple hours prior. Once I did get home, my symptoms just continued to get worse and worse, and it got to the point where just prior to my gastroenterology appointment, I ended up having to be hospitalized. So I ended up getting diagnosed in April of 2010. Right after my diagnosis, I ended up spending 10 days in the hospital. For 10 days, I couldn't hold down any food, and every single time I would eat, I would either throw it up or I would have to go diarrhea. And it got to the point where not only was I not able to eat any food, but I couldn't even drink anything. So I was heaving and basically throwing up phlegm. I couldn't even throw up food or water because I was so dehydrated and I didn't have any food in my system. One of the things that really helped me in that first bout, I remember my father, he works with somebody whose mother had cancer at the time and they had grown medical marijuana. So my father had gotten some from him to give to me. I ended up smoking some. And again, 10 days, I did not eat anything at all. Every time I tried to eat something, I would throw it up immediately. After smoking the weed, what happened was I was able to eat a full box of crackers, an entire bowl of soup, and I was still hungry afterwards, which was amazing for me. So that's a little bit of a side note. You could ask me in another video, but that was one thing that helped me through my first bout with ulcerative colitis. Once I did get diagnosed and once the symptoms did subside and I started feeling a little bit better, I started going back to work, and that's when I really started to change my diet around. So one of the things that I did was I started following a paleo diet, and that made a huge difference in my personal health. Once I started the paleo diet, my symptoms were never really that bad. I would always get some upset stomach and things like that, but I never got to the point where I was getting blood in the stool or I had to be hospitalized. If we fast forward now to the summer of 2010, that was when I was hospitalized for the second time. What happened in the summer of 2010 was I ended up going out with a friend. We went to a pool bar. We started playing some pool. After we shot some pool, we wanted to go out for wings. Well, I say we, really it was my best friend wanted to go out for wings, and he convinced me, so he brought me with him. And the place that I went to, they did have this thing called Lord of the Wings, where it was basically wings that were not breaded. So I decided, you know what, I'm paleo. Since I'm doing the paleo diet, I could at least get the Lord of the Wings because it's not breaded, so it won't interfere with my diet. And the one thing that didn't occur to me at the time was that they don't really care about people's dietary choices. If you're going to go to a wing place, they don't give a crap about what your dietary concerns are. So they're going to be deep frying all the wings in the exact same oil. If you order breaded wings or if you order Lord of the Wings, they're just going to deep fry it in the exact same batch. So while you're not consuming the breaded wings, you can still get cross-contamination through the oil. And that's one thing. Gluten had affected me very, very bad. And that's why I had decided to go paleo. So just that little bit of deep fried wings from the wings that I had, even though they were not breaded, was bad enough to put me back in the hospital for another 7 days. So in summer of 2010, I was hospitalized again for another 7 days. My best friend made it up to me by recording UFC and bringing it to me in the hospital, and we ended up watching it, so that was kind of cool. But I was hospitalized for another 7 days, and it was pretty bad. And another thing that was really annoying about that particular time was the doctor who was in charge of seeing me wasn't really taking my issue seriously. I told him what I was doing in terms of my dietary preferences and how gluten had affected me, and that's why I cut it out. And he was basically saying that it was all in my head, it had nothing to do with the gluten, and he would not let me leave the hospital until I had a cookie. And he literally brought me a cookie, and he watched me eat it and would not let me leave until I ate it. So I ended up eating it, got out of the hospital, felt like shit afterwards. But I got out of the hospital, went back to what I was doing in terms of the paleo diet, and I was feeling pretty good for another few months. Fast forward to winter of 2010, one of my NHL athletes that I was coaching at the time, he was seeing this naturopath, and he had convinced me to go see the naturopath. Now, at the time, I was feeling really, really good, so there was no real reason for me to see the naturopath, but I was like, you know what? A second opinion is never going to hurt. Let me go to him, see exactly what he says. Maybe he'll give me some good advice that I can carry on in the future. So I went to go see him. He gave me some advice. He told me to stop taking my medication and instead take all of these natural supplements. And I was in the hospital again right after I took his advice. Within 4 days, I ended up back in the hospital. And this is one of the reasons why I kind of get annoyed when people are super all natural everything and they try to convince you get off all your medications. You should try a natural approach. For some people, it'll work. For people like me, that could put you back in the hospital. So if somebody does recommend to you to get off all your medications and go the all-natural route, unless they are your medical professional or if they have seriously studied and they have a track record of proven results, do not listen to them. They don't know what your body is. If they're just giving you generic advice and saying get off everything that's chemical and get on everything natural, don't bother listening to that person. See what works for you. For me, that was terrible advice because it put me back in the hospital. Now, one of the things that I will say is I am very pro trying to avoid all these toxic chemicals and things that could harm your body. However, there is a time and a place where medications will be necessary. So I'm not anti-medicine or anti-natural. I'm very pro-natural products. However, I do realize that there is a time and a place for some medical intervention, and not all the time you will be able to correct everything through natural remedies. So that's just a side note. Going back to my experience, so the third time I ended up getting hospitalized, it was another 7 days I was in the hospital, and at this point, because it had been 3 times within just over 6 to 8 month period, my family was trying to convince me to have my colon removed. And I did not want to go that route. I knew that there had to be a way that I could figure out to improve my health just through proper nutrition, proper supplementation, stress release exercises. So I managed to avoid getting my colon removed, and I tried to implement as many natural remedies as I could, and I have been in remission ever since. So pretty much since winter of 2010, I have not been hospitalized. I haven't had any blood in my stool, and I haven't really had any serious bouts with ulcerative colitis. There have been times since then where I'll eat things that I know I shouldn't eat, and I feel kind of crappy afterwards. but I haven't been hospitalized. I haven't had blood in the stool. It's been almost 10 years now that I have been symptom-free. Well, not completely symptom-free. As I stated, I have gotten occasional bouts of nausea or diarrhea over the last 10 years, but every single time that I did that, it was because I ended up eating something that I shouldn't have eaten, or I did something that I shouldn't have done. Generally, if I stick to my diet, I am symptom-free and I don't have any issues with the ulcerative colitis. So that was back in 2010. Fast forward again to 2013. January 2013 was the very first time that I decided to try doing the carnivore diet. At the time, I had never even heard of the carnivore diet, didn't know what it was. I was just using my knowledge of the paleo diet, and one of the reasons I started the paleo diet was because one of the trainers at the time that I was working with, he was the best trainer in the entire industry for the company that I worked with. He was basically convincing me to try the paleo diet, and he was explaining how the paleo diet is you eat how your Paleolithic ancestors did. Back 10,000 years ago, we didn't have grains, we didn't have all these things, so that's the way you eat. So I applied that same logic to meat. Pretty much, if you were going to eat something back then, meat was going to be the most satiating thing, and it was the most readily available because it was easy to find animals than it was to find plants, because at the time people weren't planting. So to come across plants was very, very rare. So I applied that same logic, tried just eating meat only, and for 2 months I felt amazing. All I pretty much did was rotisserie chickens and that type of food for 2 months, and I had no issues at all. Best I ever felt in my life. After the 2 months, I decided to incorporate some more vegetables, so I went back to paleo, which was what I was doing previously again. And yeah, never had any issues at all. Fast forward to 2015, I decided to experiment with going vegan. Now, as I've mentioned in the past, it did not work for me. And one of the things was, before I went vegan, I was very opposed to the vegan diet. And something had just hit me where I thought, you know what, for me to be opposed to something that I haven't even tried is kind of stupid. So I want to try, see how my body responds. When I went on it, for the first 2 weeks, I felt absolutely amazing and had no issues with my digestive health, gastrointestinal distress, none of that. Then after about 2 weeks, I noticed that a couple grains would upset me. I had 7 grains that I would cycle through every single day, and it was basically my version of a rotation diet while on a vegan diet. And teff and amaranth were 2 of the grains where I would eat them, and within 5 minutes I had to go to the washroom. So after a couple weeks, I ended up removing those. Symptoms subsided a little bit, and then I started noticing the similar symptoms where I would get diarrhea within a few minutes of eating when I would do quinoa and a couple other grains, so I removed those. By the end of the 3 months, the only grains I could consume without completely destroying my stomach or making me go to the washroom immediately after eating it were millet, buckwheat, and long grain brown rice. So I decided after those 3 months, I told myself I would give myself 3 months to try it, and after the 3 months were done, I decided to go back to the carnivore diet. Within 4 days from going diarrhea every single time towards the end of the vegan experiment, all of those symptoms were gone. So within 4 days of going from vegan to carnivore, no more diarrhea, no more gastrointestinal distress, everything felt amazing, and again, it was the best I had ever felt. I ended up doing that for 2 months. After 2 months, started adding in some vegetables, went back to paleo again, and I was basically doing paleo from that point up until December of 2019. Then in January of 2020, so January of this year, I decided that I was going to experiment again with going vegetarian. At first I told myself I would go vegan for 2 weeks because the first 2 weeks on vegan back in 2015, I felt amazing. So I thought if I only limit myself to 2 weeks, it probably won't affect me, and then I could go back to paleo. However, I decided to go against that and thought, you know what, instead of vegan, let me do vegetarian for a few months. And for the first couple weeks, same thing. I was feeling really, really good. And then after the first couple weeks, I noticed that I would get diarrhea. My energy levels were low. My inflammatory markers got higher. I was getting really bad joint pain. I was getting weaker. I was getting a lot more sore after my workouts. So I cut the vegetarian experiment a little bit early. After 2 months was when I decided to go on carnivore. But for those 2 months, the last month, I would only go vegetarian on my rest days. As I mentioned in a few videos ago, my workout was a 3-day split. I would work out on days 1, 2, and 4. Days 3 and 5 I would rest. So days 3 and 5 were my vegetarian days. Days 1, 2, and 4 were my meat eating days. And whenever I would consume high vegetables, I just noticed that I felt terrible. I would get really, really bloated, and I looked like I was a pregnant woman by the end of the day, especially at the end of the day, because on those days, a lot of days that I didn't work out, I would fast. I would only eat breakfast and I wouldn't eat. So generally, vegetables tend to bloat me, And if I go for a really long period of time, it also tends to bloat me. So when you combine a vegetarian diet with fasting, you could imagine just how large my stomach looked. In fact, I had posted a before and after picture, and the before and after picture, a lot of people thought that I was sticking my gut out because it was so pronounced in the before picture. The truth is though, the day that I took that picture, the night before was my vegetarian day. So I only ate vegetables the day before, which normally bloats me. And then after that, I had gone the entire day without eating, which further bloats me. So that's why my stomach was really protruding in that before picture that I took a few months ago. Anyway, back to the carnivore diet. After doing the 2 months of vegetarian experiment, I decided to cut it a month short. I was originally going to do it 3 months, but then I decided March 1st, 2020, that's going to be when I go back on carnivore. And I told myself I would do it for at least 3 months. I want to give myself 3 months this time, see how I feel, because the last 2 times that I did it, it was only for 2 months. Right off the bat, I felt really, really good. The only thing that was different between this time and the last 2 times on carnivore was I was getting diarrhea on this third iteration of the carnivore diet. I don't know why that was, but I do have some speculation as to why that happened. I had cut out my supplements towards the end of 2019 because I went for a follow-up colonoscopy, and then after the follow-up colonoscopy for about 2 months, my stomach was destroyed. I was going diarrhea every single day, and I think it had to do with the colonoscopy. So I did an HCl protocol, restored my HCl levels, my digestion went back to normal, wasn't experiencing diarrhea, and I had removed all of the supplements once I did my HCl protocol because I only wanted to do the HCl. I ended up reintroducing the magnesium, fish oil, ended up getting diarrhea, and when I removed it, the diarrhea went away. So I attributed the diarrhea to the magnesium in the fish oil. When I started back on the carnivore diet, I reintroduced the fish oil, reintroduced the magnesium, and the diarrhea came back for that first week. And on day 7, 8 of the carnivore diet, I got really, really bad diarrhea. So I decided to cut out the fish oil and cut out the magnesium, and when I cut that out, my bowel movements went back to normal, and they've been normal ever since, with the exception of a couple days where I went really, really high with my salt, and because of the high salt intake, I did have a little bit of loose stool. But aside from that, pretty much from March 1st up until now, everything has been amazing. I haven't had any issues with loose stool. My skin has gotten clear. I had a bunch of seborrheic dermatitis. If you had seen me before, my chest was all red and bumpy. I had a bunch of red rashes on my upper lip. My ears were all rashed up, my arms. And within the first week of going carnivore, all of those symptoms had subsided. It wasn't completely gone, but it went from a bright red to a very light pink color. And when I was on the vegetarian diet, it had gotten worse. It was getting redder and redder. So in terms of how the carnivore diet has helped me this last time around, it has helped with the seborrheic dermatitis. It has helped with the sinusitis because I'm not really using the nasal spray anymore. I'll use this product called Navage that shoots some water up the one nose and comes out the other nostril. So my sinusitis has improved. My ulcerative colitis, haven't had any issues with that. And also my seborrheic dermatitis has improved. So that's what the carnivore diet has done for me. Now, in terms of you and should you try it and will it help you, I can't say. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. What works for me might not work for you. So if you do have ulcerative colitis and you're not in remission and you want to try something that could possibly help you, what I would recommend is try doing different diets and see what works for you. You can try doing vegan, you could try doing vegetarian, paleo, keto, carnivore. Try a bunch of different diets, see which one works for you. Whichever one works, stick with that. And the other thing too is you don't have to stick to one diet for the rest of your life. You could do vegan for a month or two, then switch over to keto, switch back to vegetarian, then go to carnivore. Whatever you're in the mood for, as long as you know that those foods do not negatively impact your health, it's okay to switch from different diets. You don't have to stick to one diet for your life. The best diet is going to be one that you can sustain. And for me personally, the carnivore diet has been the easiest diet that I've ever been able to sustain. The 3 diets in terms of health that have worked the best for me, that have gotten me into remission and have given me absolutely 0 symptoms, have been the paleo diet, the keto diet, and the carnivore diet. So those are the 3 that work for me. However, everyone's going to be a little bit different. Experiment with different diets, see what works for you, and whichever one works for you, stick with it. But you don't need to be so strict that you have to only follow one diet for the rest of your life. As your body changes, you can also change your diet as well. You don't need to stick to one diet for the rest of your life. Me personally, those are the 3 that have worked the best for me, the paleo, keto, and carnivore diets. However, Just because it's working for me right now, it doesn't mean it'll work for me next year. So next year I might not be carnivore anymore. Next year I might try something else. But on this last iteration of the carnivore diet, I have started March 1st. It is now August 1st, so it's been 5 months that I've been doing carnivore strictly. I haven't had a single vegetable. I haven't had anything that isn't salt. In terms of what I put on my food, I'll put some Parmesan cheese sometimes. That's about it. But it's really just I'll either barbecue, fry, or crock pot my food and put either some sea salt. Just recently, I've been adding some Parmesan cheese just to add a little bit of flavor, but that's what's been working for me. I've been symptom-free pretty much for the last 10 years, except for when I stray from my diet. But as long as I follow my diet, I have no issues with digestion and gastrointestinal health. That's pretty much it for today's video. I hope this video somehow helps you. And if you have any questions with regard to the carnivore diet, or if you have any other questions with regard to my experience with ulcerative colitis and using the carnivore diet to treat it, then go ahead, ask your questions down in the comment section. I'll either respond to you directly in the comment section or answer your questions during another one of our Sunday Q&As. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again next week. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked what you saw, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our videos. And if you have any questions, ask them down in the comment section, and we'll either respond to you directly in the comment section or answer your questions during another one of our weekly Sunday Q&As. Keep fit, have fun, and we'll see you again next week.